Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. Hey, Jeff, have you been taking a lot of photos lately?
As a matter of fact, I have.
Really? A lot? Like a lot? Or just, a few, like one a day?
More than I had before. At least, sort of about one a day with a few bursts of getting out for the weekend kind of a thing. But yes.
It's true. I see on Instagram that you went camping.
Yes. We went camping and looking at August compared to maybe July and June put together, it's definitely been an uptick in actual shooting, which has been really nice.
Yeah. So we set ourselves a challenge. I think we decided on this in early July. Our challenge was that we would each shoot. I don't like the word shoot here. We would each create one photo a day. It means we could shoot 100, but we'd pick a photo a day. We'd end the day with at least one photo that was sort of a keeper.
And also, when you say create one a day, that just made my mind, of course, go into post-production. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I could have just gone back and edited something old. But no, that wasn't the point. We were trying to actively shoot every day and try to end up with something, as you said, that we'd be happy enough to share.
Right. And part of the reason is that we've talked about this sort of thing in the past. We've talked about constraints. We've talked about personal projects, et cetera. And we figured this would be a good way for us to actually put our money where our mouths are.
Well, this is kind of the strange thing about what we do. I mean, we're both professional writers. We also shoot photos. And maybe I'm projecting onto you, but for me, I find that I often it's very easy to give advice and say, well, yes, you should go out in your garden because there are lots of things to photograph. And then I get really busy, or just the last several months I've been very, very busy with work projects, and so I come to that point where I'm like, oh, I have not actually really taken many photos recently.
What I thought about while we were doing this is that it spurs us to think of photography. It spurs me, at least, to think of photography in a different way.
Definitely.
It spurred me to think of not just waiting for opportunities. It made me look around for things when I didn't necessarily have a lot of time to look around for things. It changed the way I was looking at the world. It activated my eye in some ways. Of course, we have the complications of COVID, lockdown, fear of dying if you go out and someone coughs on you. You said you had work projects. For me, the first day of the month was the first day of the European Shakuhachi Society's online festival. And It was 5 hours a day over 2 weekends. So I was very busy for those 2 weekends. In fact, my first photo is of one of my shakuhachis on my desk. And the photo I picked from the Sunday following, so the end of the festival, was another shakuhachi photo. So the weekends for me were quite busy. Work wasn't too busy, but then it got busy. And these days, most of the photos I shoot are within walking distance from where I live. A couple of them weren't. There was one day at the end of the month when we got really brave. We said, what if we go out? What if we get in the car and drive someplace? And we actually drove into Stratford-upon-Avon, which was relatively empty. This is about 7 o'clock at night. It was relatively empty. So one of the pictures is of the house where Shakespeare was born. We went around to Anne Hathaway's cottage, and we went to a couple of the tourist sites. It was relatively empty, but it's the first time that I've actually been in town in months.
And your car started. That's good.
The car started. Well, we use the car regularly at a minimum to go pick up groceries.
Good.
We order groceries, what they call click and collect. You order online, you go pick it up outside the store. So we do that at least once a week. So, but what I found about the process was it makes you rethink what you're doing with photography. When it's not just the random moments that attract you, it kind of forces you to think of photography at different times. And there were days when I'd be sitting at my desk and working, and it's like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. It's the end of the day. Oh no, I've got to go take a photo.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think for me, this was one of the big surprises. So just to set out our parameters, we were not super strict about this. Our idea was just, let's take one picture every day in August and have it be something that we would be willing to share both with each other. And we'll talk a little bit about how we did that, but also share with all of the listeners. And we'll have links in the show notes, of course, so you can see what we did and what we came up with. And for me, it sort of sounded like an easy assignment. Like, all you got to do is go make one picture, right? Mm-hmm. And because it was open-ended, like, of course, I could have closed my eyes and stuck my hand out the window and snapped a picture of something. But of course, I'm not that careless. And I know that you're all going to be looking at these photos. So even though I would not say that these are the best photos I have ever taken, a lot of them, are perfectly fine. And either, and this also ties into stuff we've talked about before. There are some photos in there that may not be really great photos, but they have meaning for some reason. The circumstances have meaning to me. And so all of that just sort of came bubbling up unexpectedly for this thing that I pictured as a mechanical exercise of, okay, go outside, take a picture of something, or stay inside, switch to that photographer's eye where I'm looking at composition and light and shadow and all of that. And it surprisingly was a deeper exercise than I thought.
Yeah. Now, I had an additional constraint that you didn't. I decided that I was going to shoot all of this with my Fujifilm 35 millimeter lens. So that's a 50 millimeter equivalent. All of it at minimum ISO of 1600. If you remember, in a previous episode, I mentioned that as my snapshot, my idea was use high ISO for the grain. And all in black and white. There's only one exception. Well, there's two exceptions. There's one exception in color, a photo of a squirrel, because a squirrel in black and white isn't that great. And another exception is on the 30th of August, I gave up and I took an old photo and re-edited it a bit. And then on the 31st, I didn't shoot any. However, I got 30 photos. You only got 26. So I win.
You totally win. Yes. Well, and that also goes back to, for anybody who wants to do this, and we definitely encourage you to do this, it was also important to not be like really hard on ourselves, or at least for me to be hard on myself.
For it not to be a chore.
Exactly. For not to be a chore. There were some days that, as you'll see, there are shots from the same day that I repeated because I really liked to shot and I didn't have anything that one day. So, if this were a class assignment, I probably would have failed miserably because I didn't follow the letter of the assignment. But at the same time, this was my own assignment. And if I didn't end up with 30 or 31 photos, that's okay.
One thing I find interesting about your photos is there's a lot of black and white, and you don't really shoot black and white that much, do you?
That is entirely your fault.
Yep.
Quite honestly, because you were shooting in black and white, and that helped me see everything else in black and white. Oftentimes when I make black and white, I either have a very specific idea of a scene that should be in black and white. Maybe it has high contrast or whatever. But quite often I'll look at something and maybe it's just sort of okay in color. And I can either spend a lot of time messing with the color, but I'll usually convert it to black and white and just see how that looks. The simple truth is you can make a mediocre image a bit better by converting it to black and white often.
Now, so, I want to take umbrage with that. You can't necessarily make a mediocre image better, but you can take an image where the colors get in the way of the shapes and make it better with black and white.
Yes. And also I will say, to defend myself, you can make a mediocre image better. I didn't necessarily say you could make a mediocre image good. And I think that's a distinction.
Okay.
So I think in all of the black and white cases that I have here, actually, and again, I'm blaming you directly, I was actually shooting with the black and white arose simulation turned on. So I was actually shooting those in black and white, I think with the exception of maybe a few, because you were coming up with these great black and white photos. It just made me say, all right, this seems like an assignment that would be good for me to just think in black and white where necessary.
Right. So when I shoot in black and white, I always turned it on in the camera so I'm seeing in black and white. And I think that's necessary. Black and white shouldn't always be an afterthought. Sometimes it can. You shoot in color, you think, how would it look in black and white? But if you really want to shoot black and white regularly, you have to get yourself into that mode where you're seeing in black and white. For me, Arose, the film simulation, is a film stock. It's like back in the film days, I would choose either black and white or color to put in my camera. I wouldn't have options. Of course, I'd look through an SLR and see the world in color. Mm-hmm. Unlike now, the advantage we have is that we see it in black and white. But if you just take a color image and try it in black and white, that's not always the best way to do it, I think.
One of the surprises that I found is sometimes when I was shooting in black and white, so one of the great advantages, if you're shooting in RAW especially, you can shoot with your simulation in black and white. And when you get the raw file is still going to be in color because it's just the raw data.
Right.
And so there was one example, I want to say it is like maybe the sixth or seventh photo that I shot. I was shooting a colander full of blackberries, and I had the acro simulation on, and I had some interesting angles, and just kind of messing about, which was also kind of a nice thing about this assignment, which was just giving yourself the freedom to just spend 10 minutes shooting a bowl of fruit that you picked. The one that I ended up sharing is actually in color because the colander was red, but I was shooting with a macro lens, and it's super close, and it has it almost looks like a black and white image, but there's a little bit of a purple tone to it.
Well, it's almost monochrome in the sense that it's reddish purple, sort of wine red and white.
Exactly. And so that was kind of a nice surprise because when I brought it into Lightroom and looked at it there, of course, Lightroom discarded the Acros preview. And so normally what I do then is I'll just select everything and apply Acros as the color profile so I get back to what I saw when I was shooting. And in this case, that popped out to me, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to try this one in color, and that's the one that I liked.
One of your photos early on that I think is just stunning is the photo of a wine glass on, I guess it's on a windowsill or on the edge of a...
It's a deck railing. That's
a stunning example of black and white photography. You've got vivid shapes. You've got contrast. You've got the black bottom, I guess the railing of the deck. You've got the interesting image that's inverted of whatever the alcohol is in the glass. That to me is a very strong image.
Thank you. It was a very strong drink, so it was perfect.
What was it?
Actually, it was some white wine.
It must have been very sweet because there's long legs on it. Do you know what the legs are in wine?
Yes, the little curlies that
the
stick to the side.
That come down, yeah.
Yeah.
The more alcohol there is or sugar, the longer the legs are.
Ah.
But
it was delicious.
I found that quite a stunning photo. And another one that I really like is you've got this one of a boat, which when I look at it, it's almost abstract, and it takes a while to see it because you have some really interesting framing. You've got the boat and the reflection, and then the guy lines holding onto the boat. That
was an example of sort of the reverse of something that I shot in color, but when I saw it, I absolutely was thinking black and white. Like I didn't make the effort to switch into the Acros simulation, but I knew because it was very angular, that was a shot that was pure composition, and I knew that it was going to end up in black and white.
I noticed we both took a few photos of food. In your case, what was your thing? Is it kind of it's not an omelet. I see mint leaves and eggs and tomatoes. What is it?
Oh yes, it was delicious.
Okay. It looks good.
Yeah, it's basically like a one pan bake. It's got garbanzo beans or chickpeas, depending on where you are, mint leaves, eggs, just this like nice tomatoey kind of mixture. I have to admit, I kind of felt like I was cheating that day because, okay, here we are. This is probably 4 or 5 days in, and here I am taking an iPhone snap of food. And like, I seriously had that thought of, is this allowed? I mean, because It's so pedestrian now to just sort of say, okay, I'm gonna shoot a picture of whatever I'm eating.
Yeah.
But it turned out really good. I did a little bit of placement. You see, there's some like flatbread over on the side that I kind of fanned out. Like I was deliberate about it. It wasn't just a quick snap, but I liked the colors. And again, it sort of represented that day. I didn't shoot anything else that was interesting. And at the end of the day, I kind of liked that the best.
Yeah. So in mine, around the same day, I think, I took one photo of part of the food display in the farm shop that's next door to my house. So my landlord is the local farmer. He has 200 acres and he has his farm shop. It's the size of a garage. In fact, it's probably an old garage. And it's got an honesty box. So you can weigh your food and pay your money. And so you can see some of the food that was there. And I just thought it was interesting because this is like the ultimate artisanal, fresh fruits and vegetables. He's got courgettes, also known as zucchinis in your country, mushrooms, and a couple of tomatoes that come locally. And I thought that this spoke a bit about lockdown, in fact, because my partner and I are taking advantage of this farm shop to have lots of fresh vegetables, pretty much, any day, any time of the day. The other day I made leek and potato soup and I said, oh, I need more garlic. I'll just go to the farm shop. It's that easy.
Nice. That's so much better than having to go to a store. I want to say one of the things about this shot is I would totally expect this shot to be in color because you've got the tomatoes and you've got the greens and you've got like all of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it really, really works in black and white. And actually for me, the fruit and the vegetables, those don't stick out to me. For me, it's the signs and the stapler in the window and that sticks out to me. And I think if you had done it in color, it would have been all about the food itself and then everything else would have gone in the background.
Exactly.
But this way,
what I wanted to photograph
that.
What I wanted to photograph was the signs, the handwritten signs, the courgette where he's pasted a new price over it on an envelope because they're either cheaper or more expensive than they were previously.
Yeah.
The way it's all sort of improvised. And it's actually an interesting little shop because it is improvised and yet it's very professional in the sense that they've got lots of good products. So my other food was a few weeks later, I made some Irish soda bread and it was coming to the end of the day. Didn't have any photos. I said, I'm going to take a picture of my food. Your same logic earlier. It's like, well, we've got a picture of food. But what turns out is that Irish soda bread is incredibly interesting in black and white.
So much texture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've got the light from the window behind it. You've got the shadows. I don't think it's a great photo, but I think as a study, it's kind of interesting to look at that particular thing and how the black and white is working.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and you're activating your brain in that sense of, okay, here's this thing that I see every day, and look at how the light is hitting it, and look at how the shadow is falling off, and the lower half is not in complete shadow. You've got some sort of fill going on, maybe reflected off of who knows what. But that, and also what sort of counters do you have? Is that like thin bamboo? Maybe?
Yeah, it's one of those IKEA bamboo things.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Where they paste together a bunch of bamboo. It's like 4 inches thick. It's a great workspace, by the way. If you ever need a kitchen workspace. Bamboo is very solid, but it doesn't dull your knife. Mm-hmm. So it's quite good. Having
that at the diagonal rather than trying to do like a typical top-down kind of shot also adds to this.
Yeah.
No, I thought that worked out really well. One of the things that I notice about your photos, which is not a surprise, especially compared to mine, is there are a lot more geometric shots here where you're really looking at geometric shapes. I mean, you have an umbrella or
it's a canopy of a gazebo.
Canopy of a gazebo, yeah. Which is like, I can tell immediately what it is, although I couldn't get the right word there. This is all about angles and just like a peak of the sky and the clouds up there.
Well, this is actually an interesting photo just for the context. So we had a socially distanced family gathering. My partner's brother wanted to come visit, and he has type 1 diabetes, so he is at risk. He rented one of the holiday cottages that my landlord rents. And then it turned out that my partner's daughter and granddaughters were on the way back to Manchester from the south. And they said, oh, I wonder if we could stop by. So we couldn't keep them in our house. So they stayed in another holiday cottage. So they only stayed for a few days. Mm-hmm. We couldn't keep them in our house. And this was, this was taken on August 6th. This was the week where we had weather in the low to mid 60s with rain, and then a couple days later in the high 80s.
Wow.
And we had to do all this in the garden with this gazebo with chairs and tables underneath it. It was actually not simple because of the complicated weather. But this was the end of the day, I think, with a glass of wine, had my camera. I look up and it's like, oh, it's there. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Those are great moments to find, especially as we've talked about, like your eye is going to be more attuned to looking for things like that. One question I have about your photos, how many of these, if any, did you do any sort of setup? Are these all found situations? Or were there any that you...
There's one that was a setup. There's really only one. In fact, I don't like setting up photos. I like finding things. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you can spot the one that is set up.
Is it the one with the triangular shapes?
No, those are little planters that are sitting on an old bench in the garden that my partner put there, waiting to nail them onto a wall someplace. No, there's one that's really obvious.
How is it that I'm missing them?
The one with the 5 stones on the bottom.
Oh.
You don't just like toss 5 stones and they go into a star position on, this I shot on the patio. The stones just don't land like that. But no,
that's a good point.
They're all, to be fair, the 2 shakuhachi photos are sort of set up to get the light right. But they were already on the desk and I was thinking, okay, how can I photograph them? But everything else is just a found photo in the sense that I don't like setting up, unless I'm shooting flowers or something, I don't like setting up photos. I like discovering something that's out there that I haven't seen, and that you put that frame around, and all of a sudden, as the great Gary Winogrand quote goes, I photograph things to find out how they looked when they're photographed.
Yeah. So I have, I think, 2 shots that are deliberately set up. And
I think both of them involve coffee.
No, actually, those are kind of found. Well, I guess you could say that those are, well, no, those aren't set up because I was making coffee and that was the important part. And while it was being made, I just had my phone nearby. There's one shot of espresso, which like I'm almost kind of embarrassed by. It really didn't involve very much work. It's really not a great photo. It's really not even a great espresso pull, but it was getting to the end of the month and I realized that I was behind and I was like, okay, you know what? This is going to work.
And you hadn't done any coffee photos yet.
And I hadn't done any coffee photos, which seems really out of character for me. So I guess I really was trying to think out of the box. No, the 2 shots that were set up, one of them, you can see my wife and my daughter from overhead. Yeah. They're working on a rock project. And that was... they're out in the yard being adorable. And so I like went and I got my drone and flew it over the top of them to get an actual top down shot, not me, awkwardly balancing on a ladder.
I was wondering about that. Yeah. I was wondering if it was maybe you were somehow with a tripod out of a window upstairs in your house or something.
That could have also worked, but I decided to do this. And of course, what you don't see is them sort of patiently enduring the fact that there's a sound right above them. The only other one that was like very deliberately set up, and actually it took a long time for me to get this shot, was the one of me sitting in a corner of our living room working on my laptop. And that was purely, it was late. I had reached the end of the day and I had not shot anything at all. And this is also an example of one of those that, it's not a great shot, but I was writing my dad's obituary at the time. Oh. And so I kind of wanted to sort of memorialize that a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, this isn't any sort of award-winning shot, but it's that example of something that I'm going to be able to look back on it and see and feel exactly how I felt at that moment.
Okay, you've got one photo, which I think, I'm going to be very honest with you, I think it's a masterpiece. This is beautiful. It's this photo on the ferry. I don't know if that's your wife or daughter leaning over. You can barely see the person. I think it's your daughter. But the colors of the sunset and the colors of the yellowish color inside the ferry, the way it's cut in half on an angle this is just a beautiful photo. It's extraordinary.
Oh, thank you. That's actually my wife and her sister that were both on the railing there. And I messed with this. So the core of it is shot as you see it. In fact, maybe I'll try to put in like a before and after, because I was, very much trying to get that beautiful sunset. It's a clear sky, but you have like oranges and purples and also have the light from inside the ferry. And I tried a lot of different things to try to bring up the shadows so we could see them a little bit better. And then it just drew attention to the big flat side of the ferry there. So I just left them in silhouette.
And you can barely see them. You have to zoom in to see them. You don't notice them otherwise.
Right.
And I think that works better. But it's the contrast of the different colors of the reddish in the sky, of the bluish purple in the sea, and the yellow and the green in the ferry that I think is just wonderful.
That was one of those times when I was very deliberately shooting and knowing what I would get.
How long is that ferry crossing?
This was going from Anacortes to one of the islands.
I have no idea what that means. I'm just thinking you had plenty of time. You saw the light and you had plenty of time to get in position, to check your exposure, to try different shots and...
Yes, absolutely. So this ferry crossing takes about an hour, and actually we'd come up on deck because they had announced over the PA that there were I think orcas in the water, or some orcas had been spotted, and of course we got up there and we didn't see anything, but turned around and the sunset started doing all of this great color, and so I was able. This right here, I was able to shoot for maybe 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So I have a whole lot of versions of this. There's one that I almost used that had the silhouette of like a father and his son going through the door there, but then it drew away from the symmetry of the two colors.
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
We should do these podcasts more often where we compliment each other.
I have to say, I don't have many keepers in mine. I think there are a couple good photos, but most of them are done for a project and will just, serve that purpose.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly pleased with... It's kind of hard in this situation where you don't really have a lot of time. It's the end of the day. You're tired. Some of them I shot during the day, maybe on the weekend. But in a lot of cases, it's the end of the day. Or there's one is my neighbor's son in front of a door trying to untangle one of these things you hang clothes on to dry. And I was just walking around with my camera and he was there. So I took a few shots. I don't take photos of people very often. There's one of my partner early up. But it is a difficult process to go out and find something, because it's not just finding a photo, it's finding something different from what you've done the other days in the month. And as the month goes on, it gets more difficult. Yeah.
I think it's remarkable that there are only 4 pictures of cats in this whole collection.
Right? Yeah. So that's me.
I applaud your restraint and your good job.
Yeah. So the one of Rosalind looking face on to the camera, she's the white cat. That's late at night. And it's like, okay, I got nothing. The others were, I'm outside and I'm honestly just don't have the energy to think of taking photos. It's like at specific times, energy is gone and you've got to maybe just give up and just take photos without thinking too much at that time.
Yes. Actually, that is a great point, because this does require energy. And that's something that I didn't really expect, because you're like, look, there's stuff all around us. All I have to do is take one picture a day. That doesn't sound so hard. And, maybe we're making it more difficult on ourselves than we need to. But, you and I have expectations for ourselves to make something that is good. So, yes, absolutely, we could have just gone out and blindly snapped whatever, but that would not be good enough for us.
No.
And I'm not even trying to say that in sort of a, pretentious kind of way. It's just, this is photography. This is what we like to do, and we want to do it well. And it surprisingly does take a lot of energy, even, to either set something up or just to walk around and look with that intention. It's not like you can just be doing something else and turn and snap a picture over here. Like, that happens occasionally, but
plus we're in lockdown more or less. It's sort of dangerous to go outside and to go into closed spaces.
Yeah.
If you lived in a city, it might be easier to just go wandering and take pictures of people and cars and buildings. You're in the suburbs of Seattle, so your houses all look alike, I assume, and you don't have too many people down the streets all the time. So you can't do your standard street photography of, person walking in front of an interesting wall. For me, I'm in a rural area, so there's not a lot of options. And again, the weather was either very cold or very hot, and there's all sorts of excuses, obviously. But I think this is an interesting project for anyone, just to rethink what it involves to take photos, what it means to get photos that you want to, photos that are good enough. Not always great, but good enough. I mean, personally, I think I've only got one or two that I consider keepers. I think you've got more keepers than I do, maybe because you went to more locations and you had more opportunities.
Yeah, that could be.
But I think the good enough is worth considering. We shouldn't always consider that our photos have to be great, because we're not professional photographers. We're doing this because we enjoy it. So get photos that are good enough. Use it as a learning experience to judge your photos. To maybe you've taken a dozen photos of something and you're trying to pick the one that's best. Use it to temper your expectations about photography. Use it to learn how to use your camera, your lens. In my case, I had those constraints, self-imposed constraints, a specific lens, black and white, except for the one shot of the squirrel and the shot of the squirrel that I'm trying to get rid of. He's very difficult to get rid of. Think of the many things you can do that will get you. So in my case, I tend to shoot the 35/50 millimeter focal length quite a bit, but it might have been a good experience for me to shoot a 16 millimeter, right, for a month until you know that kind of lens. I shoot in aperture priority. Maybe I should have shot in shutter priority, again, to get to know that sort of technique on the camera.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think, I almost hate to say this, but if we had continued this for another month or 3 months or 6 months, I do believe that the quality would improve, just because photography is one of those things. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. Just the more you're thinking about it, the more you're shooting. But, and maybe I shouldn't admit this, I need a break.
Yeah.
Like, this wasn't difficult or taxing, but it sort of was. And maybe it's just because of everything else that's going on right now.
I think that we both signed on for something where we were committed and that we were doing it, showing it to each other. So we had to maintain that commitment throughout the month. Neither of us wanted to look like we were failing, even though neither of us would have blamed the other if we did fail.
Totally.
But there was, I wouldn't call it competition, but there was that sense of, okay, he's doing one, now I got to do one. For instance, I have a shot of some bees on a bird bath, because the day before or that morning you had posted a photo with bees. So
nice.
Oh, he's got bees. I got bees too.
Nice. So in the show notes, we're going to include the images, the specific images that we've talked about, but we will also post links to the shared photo albums that we created in Apple Photos app, which actually was a great way for us to be able to just automatically see what the other had been up to.
Yeah, so we each created an album, and we would each add the photos as we finished them. And so I'd often get up in the morning and find a notification on my iPhone saying, "Oh, here's a new photo from Jeff." And Jeff would get up in the morning and he'd see the same thing. And once you access a shared album, it shows up in the Photos app, either on a Mac, an iPhone, or an iPad. So I can keep looking at this album anytime I want.
When you're creating this in Photos, on the Mac, there's an option to invite people. So that's what we did. We invited each other to our albums. But there's also an option just that says public website that will generate an iCloud shared album link. And that's what we're going to use, again, linked in the show notes so that anyone can see our shared albums.
And if anyone else wants to try a project like this, drop us a link in our Facebook group, and it might be interesting to follow. If there's enough interest, maybe several people might want to work together on a project like this. I think we should do this again sometime next year.
Yes.
I don't particularly want to do it in winter, to be honest, because that's not the best time for photography, but maybe in the spring or early summer, not in the hottest part of summer. August is a bad time for both of us because
it is.
We're preparing for the new Apple operating systems. We've got books and articles. So it's not the ideal time for us. It's not a time when we have a lot of free time. So maybe when we run out of ideas for topics in the podcast, in the spring, we'll do this again. And maybe we'll do it with a joint constraint. We'll both pick a lens, a color black and white, a film simulator, or we'll find a constraint that we can both do. And maybe what we could do, hey, here's what we'll do. We'll do a project where we'll invite listeners to do the same thing with us and share the albums if they want, and perhaps with or without a constraint.
I think that's a great idea. And actually, I was going to recommend, based on our experience, if listeners want to do something like this, it sounds sort of corny, but I would say buddy up, because having that responsibility to somebody else to do this, even when you knew, Kirk wasn't going to suddenly unfriend me and stop talking to me because I wasn't posting enough photos, but having that responsibility to somebody else, I thought was actually very motivating throughout the whole process. So again, come to the PhotoActive Facebook group and let's see if anybody wants to start up, buddy up, chime in, share their own photos albums, and maybe do this again in October. And people can connect and let's just see how this works. Because I think it'd be really interesting to watch a progression of our listeners as well as just, looking at you and I.
Okay, have you got a snapshot?
You mentioned we've been working with the new versions of the Mac operating systems. And so, for example, I've been having to install versions of macOS Big Sur. And so in order to do that, I bought this little tiny SanDisk 16 gig USB memory stick, thumb drive, however you want to call it.
Memory stick. I haven't heard that in years.
I know. I don't even know what the proper term is.
Flash drive, thumb drive?
Flash drive, thumb drive.
Yeah.
What's neat about this is that it's kind of a gimmick, but you slide out one side and it's a USB-A plug. You slide out the other side, it's a USB-C plug. And now, how does this relate to photography? If you have a, let's say an iPad Pro or, even your Mac or whatever, 16 gigs isn't a whole lot, but this is something that is super small, super easy. If you just need an on-the-fly backup of your photos, or if you want to take some photos off of your iPad Pro and copy it to something like this rather than trying to go through the cloud. This is just like an easy, cheap. I think this cost me like $9 or something. The memory is cheap these days. Kirk, what about you?
I have a book yet again.
Yay,
I tend to have books very often. This is a small book, not very thick, a quick read. It's by Joel Meyerowitz, How I Make Photographs. It says it's published by Masters of Photography. Remember we talked about them some time ago. Joel Meyerowitz has his video course on Masters of Photography, which I took and I really enjoyed.
Right.
And this book is a sort of a capsule summary of the course. It's 118 pages or something. I read through it in an hour, in part because I'm familiar with what he's talking about. But it's got some wonderful photos in it. He explains how he took some of them. He explains some of the techniques that you need to take photos. It's not about gear. It's about anticipating the moment is one chapter. Another one is be inspired, etc. It's a nice little book, and it gives you, I'm going to say probably 100 great photos by Joel Meyerowitz. He's really one of my favorite photographers. He started out doing street photography. Then he moved to Provincetown and got an old 8x10 view camera and took these extraordinary photos of the sea and the light. And then he moved now he's in Italy and he does landscapes. A lot of this book does talk about street photography, so from his early work. But it's a nice inspirational book that talks about how to see, how to find things that are interesting. Not too expensive. It's $15, $16. So How I Make Photographs, Joel Meyerowitz. Okay, until next week.
Until next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast app.